Hey everyone, my name is Sabrina Parsons-Hang, and I'm going to be doing my presentation today on social constructivism and ethics tied to social work. Okay, so this is a word cloud of some of the research topics that I looked at. So I looked at, of course, social constructivism, research analysis. I looked at the ethics and strategic management and how that's tied directly to the social work profession, empowerment theory, engagement theory, and then learning theory, social learning theories, and overall behavior of individuals. The outline for this presentation, I'm going to start with the introduction to social constructivism and concepts of social work. So what are some social work strategies within the profession? Then I'm going to look at the historical evolution of social constructivism, some ethics and strategic management, social constructivism and ethics in strategic management specifically tied to the social work profession, and then some implications and future research. For an introduction to social constructivism and concepts of social work, social constructivism is a social learning theory that was developed by Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky. It suggested that individuals are active participants in the creation of their own knowledge. So learning takes place in social and cultural settings rather than within an individual. It's a sociological theory of knowledge according to which human development of socially situated and knowledge is constructed through the interaction with others. So like I previously stated, it's learning is taking place in social and cultural settings rather than just within the individual itself. Some concepts of social work, restoration of impaired social functioning, provision of social services, and then prevention or intervention. All right, so looking at the history or evolution of social learning and social constructivism, in the 1900s, around 1920, Dewey's inquiry theory was developed, and this is a collaboration and a problem-based approach to learning. Towards the 1970s, Vygotsky's social learning or social constructivism theory was developed. And this is learning in a social environment in order to learn new information. And then there was this concept of the zone of proximal development that was implemented. 1979, Bandura's social learning theory. People learn from watching others. So this theory's name was later changed to social cognitive theory. And this emphasized the great amount of cognition involved in learning through observation. So we learn what other people do. We learn from other people. We can, but normally people don't just learn from reading or learn from, they learn from doing, they learn from the interaction with others. That's how our broad level of knowledge, that's where all of that comes from. 1998, the engagement theory was developed. For this, motivation and increased learning succeeded through engagement. So I can't remember if the last class, if it was Nate or Cliff that talked about being on camera for our Zoom breakout rooms and being fully engaged, and that being on camera and allowing people to see you and allowing you to see the other individuals in the breakout rooms or in the discussion groups called for more engagement. You're more likely to be fully engaged in the discussion if you're on camera and you can be seen. In 2000, the critical literacy theory was developed. And in this theory, it addresses the political realm of social injustices that exist with regard to literacy, learning, and education. In 2001, the cognitive multimedia learning theory, or the CMLT, that was developed, and that sensory information is being absorbed by the learner in two different methods. So a verbal method and a visual method. In 2004, connectivism was developed. The ability to apprehend and exploit connections between fields, concepts, and ideas is at the core of the connective learning. 2005, connective knowledge. That's the knowledge emerges from the realization of interaction among networks. So knowledge is distributed across a network of connections, and therefore that learning consists of the ability to construct and traverse those networks. 2013, what's known as the maker approach. This is learning concepts of social interaction, experimental learning, self-identification, and the correction of errors. Okay, so looking at some ethics and strategic management, philanthropic social responsibility. So this is using a company's time and resources to make investments in the communities that they operate in. So there is an aim to bring social change, or usually a focus on a specific community or social injustice that they see, that this company sees or this area sees, on a weekly, monthly, daily, yearly basis. Individual responsibility and accountability for decisions being made. This is important because there needs to be some sort of decision-making process and accountability for decisions being made to ensure that they are being made appropriately and effectively. So there has to be a rhyme and reason behind a decision being made. And if there isn't, and that decision being made is not based on something else or based on something that's going to help the individual succeed in the future, then there needs to be an accountability for that decision. Transparency. So it is important for individuals to understand what is happening, what the next phase is, and what needs to be done in order for them to succeed. Okay, so now we're going to look at some ties to the social work profession. So some social work models. The cognitive behavioral therapy, or the CBT, it's individuals imagine a worst case scenario and are drawn into unhealthy thinking. So unhealthy patterns of thinking, and then they think of the worst case scenario, and they often think about what scenario is going to humiliate them the most. So giving you an example. So in the social work profession, you could have a family or, a parent or guardian that loses their children to child protection. Their thought process is they're never going to get their kids back. There's nothing that they can do to get their kids back. They're always going to be, let's just say in this scenario that the individual, the parent or guardian is addicted to drugs. They're always going to be addicted to drugs. They're never going to see their kids again. The system failed them. They're never going to be able to have supervised visitation, etc. So that's where this cognitive behavioral therapy comes in, where social workers need to get the individual out of this unhealthy mindset and understand that this is not a how do I explain it? This is not a problem that will be with them for the rest of their life. There's always a solution to the problem. And then for the next model, we have the crisis intervention model. So this focuses on intervention prior to the onset of something major happening. So there needs to be an assessment developed, their identification of a major problem. There needs to be a help for the individual to be able to cope and understand their feelings, and then an action plan and follow-up needs to be done. So action plan and follow-ups are key in the success of the social work profession and in this crisis intervention model, because there needs to be a plan so that the individual knows what needs to get done, and there needs to be a follow-up by the social worker to ensure that that plan is being done. The narrative theory. So this model aims to separate the individual from the problem. So this allows the individual to externalize their issue rather than internalize it. It relies on the individual's own skills and sense of purpose to guide them through their difficult time. So let's go back to the example of the parent or guardian that is addicted to drugs. They may live in a drug infested neighborhood. They may not be able to get off drugs. They need to get removed from that situation. They need to either get housed somewhere else. They need to be put into a residential treatment center. They need to have something put in place to get them out of the situation that they're in so that they can heal, they can succeed, and they can thrive further down in the future. Problem-solving model. So this focuses on one problem at a time, starting with the smallest problem first. This allows for the individual to have control and set the pace of the problem-solving model. The solution-focused therapy, this concentrates on what the individual is going through right now and what they may go through in the future. So another example, a social worker helps an individual involved in the child protection system, and currently their problem is drug addiction. But in the future, they have to be focused on supervised visitation, reunification, drug treatment, and much more. For the task-centered practice, this focuses on achieving measurable goals. Creating an action plan with specific tasks will allow the individual to carry out those tasks and feel a sense of achievement and empowerment by the completion of those tasks. All right, so this is just a model diagram. So I like it because it talks about, specialized services, targeted services, support services, universal services, but in the middle, improving and safeguarding individuals, families, communities, and the social well-being of all of them. That's the important, and that's the goal of social workers and the social work profession. This is the kaleidoscope model of the global social work practice, so it's a universal approach. Client community needs is all the way around the outside. That is a main goal. And then throughout the internal portion of the diagram, self-awareness, perspectives, ethics, culture, interventions, and theory, they all overlap each other and they all need each other in order to make this practice work or this model work. Okay, so looking at social constructivism and ethics and strategic management specifically tied to social work. So for social constructivism, there's two fundamental objectives. So strengthening an individual's ability to cope, and then improving social and environmental circumstances. So strengthening the ability of individuals and groups in order to cope with the difficulties and challenges that they're confronted with. And then it's looked at bringing improvements in various social and environmental circumstances to improve the satisfaction of human needs, especially those people from underprivileged and oppressed social segments. For ethics and strategic management, transparency. So what is happening, what needs to be done, what has been done, and what is the next phase for services and support. It is very important that social workers are transparent and always engaging with the client or individual so that they know exactly what the process is, what needs to get done, what they haven't done, and what the entire outline looks like. Accountability. So decisions made are held to an accountable level and error and judgments are brought forward when needed. For performance of social workers is a high priority. It's important to ask those that are actually receiving the services and the support on how things are going, what improvements need to be done, and what happened overall. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but there is not a lot of research done on interviews with people that actually receive services. A lot of the research done on, the social work profession, burnout, mental health, anxiety, stressors, trauma, all of that stuff is done from a psychologist, psychiatrist, or an actual social worker, not the person that's receiving the services. So it's very hard to improve the system because we're not looking at it from the right angle. And then individual responsibility. It should never be said that we do this because the company says so, or we do this because we've always done this. It's important that individuals maintain an ethical and strategic approach to every single decision that's made. So some implications or future research, collaborative learning, develop teamwork skills, and see individual learning as essential to success. Gather information from those getting services. So those in the social welfare system, those in the child protection system, there's very little research done through interviews on those actually receiving the services. And then look into programs to see success and change in dynamics or social changes. And then a conclusion for social constructivism. So social constructivism supports social